your jazz teachers growing up. Mine was a real sweet cat. His name was Kurt, and he played the oboe. And he's actually, if any of you have seen the Patrick Dempsey movie Loverboy, he's the guy who plays the oboe at the wedding. So I had a really good experience, but I take it you didn't really.
No, I didn't have a sweet oboe player. Yeah, my teacher. I mean, a lot of the stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was certainly the impetus for it was there's certainly a large part of autobiography in it, and but I kind of burned down on drumming for obvious reasons. So it was something that I kind of looked back on and wondered. I became a good drummer as a result of this teacher, but you kind of grapple with whether it was worth it, the process was worth it.
So you went to an academy like that?
No, in my case it was high school. He came from this sort of world, and he decided he was going to mold this high school into a top-notch competitive jazz program, and he did. I mean, he was there for about 20 years, and during that time, it was definitely like one of the best, if not the best, sort of high school jazz program in the country, and the program doesn't. He left, and the program actually wound up, basically crumbling. So, there is something to be said for the fact that this program was really kind of built from the ground up by him. But everyone was scared of him. I was scared of him.
Did he do that? You get out. You sit down. Did he do that?
Oh yeah, all the time. There would always be, I was a drummer, and there would always be other drummers. So he loved just switching, kind of like in a circle, three drummers. He'd give us like a measure, tell us it wasn't his tempo, and then put the other drummer on, and he would do that for half an hour while the band watched. And
sounds very anti-jazz.
Well, I mean, that's the irony of it, is that a lot of big band jazz is kind of weirdly anti-jazz in the sense that it's you think of jazz as this loose improvisational kind of art form, but it's when you're young and kind of learning the basic technique of the instrument, there's something about it that's very kind of raw and physical and really unforgiving. And so my experiences in that program it wasn't self-expression. It wasn't kind of sharing my feelings with musicians through music. It was really a kind of daily grind of sort of practicing till my hands bled, going to rehearsal, being scared out of my life, going back either elated because he hadn't chewed me out or utterly crushed because he had, and it was just this up and down thing for 4 years. It takes a toll.
Yeah, I mean, something that I found really amusing right away when I saw the film the first time was that his character, JK's character, was so psychotically uptight about kind of uncool, bad music, almost. Sort of Branford Marsalis jazz rather than Don Cherry jazz, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Kind of very rigid and jazz-like. So I was wondering if that experience set you off jazz entirely until you came back to it as a filmmaker, because a lot of your films involve musical performance and jazz.
In his next movie, I play a jazz pianist, if that's any.
So it's continuous.
So you have Whiplash, you have your first film, Guy and Madeline in the Park, and then you have a film you wrote called Grand Piano that Elijah Wood starred in. It was about a concert pianist, and then you have this next film called La La Land. Yeah. It's like you and Ken Russell are competing for the most films about music. So where does that come from? The need to keep putting that into the films.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's personal. It's having had very emotional experiences as a musician myself. It's you kind of write what you know, and it's a world that I know, and it's a kind of music that I know, and especially with this big band jazz that was how I learned really to play jazz drums. Was not sort of in small combos. It was in a sort of big band setting, and it's a weird kind of again, you sort of talk about it's weirdly kind of regimented and very kind of almost military for what you think of as jazz. Big band has this kind of its own style to it, and it's why there's a whole tradition of really autocratic big band leaders who are very famous for for treating their players like shit. And Buddy Rich, is a great drummer, but he was also a great band leader. And you can go on YouTube and you can hear clips, candid clips the musicians kind of recorded in their pockets of him chewing out players after rehearsal. And it makes this stuff sound tame. I mean, it's really it's kind of horrifying, but it's also, to me, it's a big part of the history of the music. It's something you can't really deny. And whether it works or not, to me, that's the question. Whether it actually gets any kind of results, I think that's the sort of moral question. But But for music that's known for improvisation and known for a certain kind of loose anarchic spirit, I think a lot of big band jazz is sort of somehow anything but.
I was wondering if J.K. or either of you guys talked at all about the Fletcher character's childhood. What made him so
the rubber ducky question?
Yeah. Did you guys ever develop a backstory for why he was so psychotic?
No, I mean I kind of left that in J.K.'s hands. We did shoot some stuff of Fletcher in his apartment alone that wound up getting cut. Just kind of, and there was no dialogue. It was just sort of little glimpses of his life outside of the school. Certainly, part of the conception of the character was that he's a guy who's a god within his school, but as soon as he steps out, he's just an ordinary schmuck. He's kind of a small individual in the larger city, and he's also not someone who is a great musician himself. I mean, he's a fine musician, but he's someone whose talent is really finding musicians. And but so I think J.K. kind of developed a sort of story for him of someone who had tried to be a musician and had kind of found that his talent was sort of like Salieri and Amadeus, that he's good enough to know who's actually better, and so he applies that.
So the story goes that when you were casting him out, you didn't know that he could drum. Is that true? Yeah. Would that not be an entry level requirement to do? No, I mean, someone so would think, yeah. So were you looking for someone who had any musical ability at all?
Yeah, I mean it was preferable, but no, I mean to me it's like a role like this requires such heavy lifting. I just needed to find the best actor, and so I kind of didn't think about what their musical aptitude was. If it had been an actor who had no musical aptitude, then we wouldn't have been able to kind of start shooting in 3 weeks, which is what we did with Miles. We would have had to have 6 months or whatever to actually to train them. But I was kind of prepared for that. I was prepared for the possibility of having to just teach someone drums myself and having to really kind of work with them for the better part of a year. And then when we got the script into Miles, by the time we got the script into Miles' hands, I knew about his drumming background, and so yeah, I mean it was a huge boon. But you still had to learn jazz, I mean, it's not a brand new instrument, but you were making the comparison sort of like a ballet dancer suddenly being required to break dance, or vice versa. But it's a different idiom, and so there was still a lot of training that Miles had to do.
What would you have done in real life had you been faced with a teacher that was that in your face?
I mean, it depends. It depends on what it was. Like I had a ballet teacher, part of the theater program that I went to up in New York. We had to do like bass, jelly, and tap, and the ballet teacher, is that stereotypical, really tough, strict ballet teacher. But I didn't really care too much because I wasn't trying to be a ballerina or anything. So just kind of, I would just let her yell at me, and didn't take too seriously. But there's also a thing in the script where I say, is there a point where you go too far where Charlie Parker would be, discouraged to meet Charlie Parker? And he says, Charlie Parker would never be discouraged. And I have kind of...
Well, Charlie Parker wouldn't have taken the shit from that guy either, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, I've worked with directors that literally set up a speaker and yelled at the actors over a megaphone and told you how to say pretty much every single word and do it flatter, flatter, flatter. Don't move your eyebrows. Don't move your eyes. Like stuff like that. And it drives you crazy. And then I worked with directors that just don't say anything and literally think everything that you do, they're just like, oh, so good, man. Oh, really? And that doesn't help me either. So it's kind of a fine line. But I've never shied away from teachers that push me, or the baseball coach, whatever it was. Like people were kind of hard on me. Then it did make me want to be better. I was never the kind of kid to just kind of shell up into a ball and talk to my mom about it. So there's a place for it.